Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Whitney Stoll. I'm the DC Post First Vice President. Alongside me is Bree Beal, our Programs Director, and who is hosting the TEEP webinar and monitoring the chat. Thank you all for being here with us today. We have over 100 registered participants from all over the country for this program, so I know we can't wait to jump into this presentation. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our February First Friday luncheon session featuring Colin Dunn from Fend Incorporated, who will be presenting the ESTCP project overview, the data diodes for facility-related control system cybersecurity. And the ESTCP is the DoD's Environmental Security Technology Certification Program that to evaluate whether the next generation industrial data diodes provide a secure, practical, and low-cost way to get data out of facility-related control systems and into the hand of the operators. We'll learn more about Colin and his team's work at USACE and CERL and his award-winning project of the year. But I'd like to start by welcoming you all to our First Friday series, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of the profession with these monthly education-focused sessions to develop topical and relevant content to our industry. So thank you for being here with us today. So first, I'd like you all to go ahead and turn off your video. Unless you're the presenter, go ahead and mute yourself if you haven't already. And please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, who you're with, where you're dialing in from. And also include any contact information, your LinkedIn profile. It's a great way to be able to network. Go ahead and ask questions throughout the presentation so we can address those during the Q&A portion at the end. Also, this is a lunchtime learning session. So if you're joining us on the East Coast, feel free to eat your lunch during the program. So we're so glad for you all joining us here today, and we're happy that we can offer this virtual program to the community, regardless of where you're attending from. Next slide, Bree. So let's start with a moment of silence to remember our active duty military, first responders, and all who need our care and thoughts throughout the world right now. Great, thank you. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our DC Post sponsors for their support: AMT, Black & Veatch, Christopher Consultants, Consigli, Gannett Fleming, Spiniello, Stantec, WSP, Jacobs with Peacock, AB Facility Service Solutions, RJ Consulting, and Stanley Consultants. We truly appreciate your support. We cannot put on these events without you, and grateful for your outstanding sponsorship. Your support helps us meet our society goals, including providing excellent content for our members, industry and government engagement, building resilient communities, connecting our future leaders throughout our student and young member groups, enriching the STEM pipeline, and preparing our military and veterans for life after service. If you're not already a DC Post sponsor and would like to support our Post with annual sponsorship, we'd love to add your name to the list for future programs and events throughout the year. Please visit our website for more information about sponsorships and how you can give back to the community through your DC Post sponsorship. All right, now it's time for the main program. Please note that this program will provide one professional development hour from the DC Post. Look for an email with the subject line document delivery from SAME DC and Eventbrite with a copy of our program slides and your PDH certificate. We are recording this session and will post the video to our website later on. So here's an overview of the program today. I'm not going to read through the learning objectives on the slide, since most of you already saw the same objectives when you registered. While I do the introduction, please use the chat, as I mentioned earlier, share contact information, and share comments and ask questions with our presenters as well. We'll have time at the end of the presentation to ask questions from your chat. We may ask you to turn on your video to ask questions directly. So please, for now, just mute yourself and turn off your video. So now introduce Colin Dunn. And Colin is the founder and CEO of Fend Incorporated, where he leads a team focused on safety and safely bringing critical infrastructure into the industrial Internet of Things. In previous roles, Mr. Dunn worked as an engineer and consultant throughout the Department of Defense, General Services Administration, and the Environmental Protection Agency. He holds degrees in mechanical engineering and business administration. He is a member of SAME and is the 2022 DC Post Award recipient for outstanding contributions to technology in the cybersecurity category. Colin, thank you for joining us today. And now I'm going to turn the program over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Whitney, and thank you, Bree, and thanks for everyone for joining. I'm excited to speak with you today. I'll pull up a few slides here, but want to make sure we save time for conversation at the end. So let me go ahead and share. All right, Whitney, can you see it?
Coming in loud and clear. There you go.
All right. Well, thanks again. Again, I'm Colin Dunn, founder and CEO of Fend, and I'm excited to speak with you about a technology that you might have heard of or heard of in passing, but maybe not worked with before, or it could be a brand new concept to you, but the concept of data diodes, which is a class of technology in the broader cybersecurity suite of tools. And we'll talk about the project from the Department of Defense Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, which wrapped up last year. And those results are now publicly available. So happy to talk through these. And again, thank you for having me today. We'll speak a bit about the technology and where it can be used, where it came from and where it's headed. We'll talk about the ESTCP project in particular, and some additional resources where you might be able to turn both for participation with ESTCP in the future, but also we can learn about some other great technologies that have been tested through the program and other resources as well. But first, to level set and get us all on the same page when we're talking about industrial or OT cybersecurity. What are we talking about, and why do we care about it? And when we talk about OT, we're talking operational technology. This can be facility-related control systems. It can be parts of very critical infrastructure or the sort of mundane systems we don't think about until they don't work, like the chillers and other things that are at data centers, hospitals, and buildings all over the DoD portfolio, as well as the rest of the world. And whether it is a facility-related control system or it might be the future of technology like EV charging stations or battery storage systems, or even other microgrids, the technologies that we're bringing into DoD installations to make them more resilient, we need to know what's happening with that equipment, old or new, so that we can run it more efficiently. We can run it without the surprise of it failing. And unfortunately, until now, that has opened the door to cyber attack on those systems. And what you would typically do with this critical infrastructure is either air gap it and check on it manually, and we really can't afford to do that anymore. There's just too much at stake if this equipment goes bad, and there's not enough maintenance people to go around checking on it when it comes down to it. But also, we can't afford to bring it online in such a way that it's not safe, borrowing technology perhaps from the IT world that might let some threats through, and that includes ransomware. And you may have heard about ransomware on IT systems, but maybe you haven't thought about it, but you could hold a building automation system for ransom. A lot of these are running Windows, in particular outdated versions of Windows. If you can hold the building automation system for ransom, you might be able to do even more damage at a hospital, for example, than if you were taking medical records. If you could actually prevent treatment from being served, that's the sort of outcome from a cyber attack that we want to avoid on the OT side. But when you think about cybersecurity in terms of a broader part of the design of systems and the maintenance of systems, you need to remember that cybersecurity is a key part of operational resilience. And if that asset is going to continue to serve the mission, we need to make sure that cybersecurity is not an afterthought, but part of how we design these systems in the first place. And thankfully, it doesn't have to be hard. Cybersecurity is an additional discipline to think about, and it's another voice to bring to the table early. But if you do so, it doesn't have to be an expensive bolt-on technology at the end of the project. You don't have to have long drawn-out approvals. And you might be able to have a more efficient and more effective overall technology platform if you can bring the right people to the table at the early discussions. And that maybe at the charrette level. I remember 15, almost 20 years ago, some of my earlier days as a mechanical engineer, really enjoying those meetings with the architects and the engineers from different disciplines. You usually later in a project, if you can't ask the structural engineer to move a column, they usually won in any argument with the mechanicals. The structurals won. But if they know really early in the project that you need to put some energy recovery system here, or you need to accommodate for rooftop solar, for example, those are the discussions that early on mean that you don't have that friction later. And I want to invite you to bring your IT teams and cybersecurity professionals into that charrette process and just try to describe what you're trying to do. It's not about the technology up front, it's about what you're trying to achieve and asking the questions of the team. What does this project need data? And you might say, well, why would I need data for a window glazing replacement, for example? Well, that probably doesn't need data, but there's actually some really neat glazing out there that can do electrochromic tinting, for example, or other things that actually do require data and controls from just the glazing. And just ask that question: is there a need for data, whether it's control systems or otherwise? And how am I going to get that data? Is another important question that you should ask the cybersecurity team that is here to help. And who should I be working with? Again, if you're bringing these voices to the table early, cybersecurity can be baked into a really good project. Now, there's lots of different types of training and technologies depending on what you're trying to do. And you've probably had your annual cybersecurity training, and you've heard of other things like air gaps, leaving that equipment disconnected. Sometimes these things can work well together. Certainly training adds a layer of defense on the human element side, but other times you might want to pair technologies like threat detection systems as well as dedicated fiber if you want to make sure that only those things that are on the network that you want to be there, you want to make sure you've structured your network such that it's harder for somebody to break onto it. And at the same time, there still may be people who are trying to cross an air gap, or for the best of reasons might be bringing a modem into an installation that they shouldn't have. Being able to detect what's happening in real time is very important. You can work, these technologies can work together, but they do have vastly different cost implementations and effectiveness. And depending on the criticality of your systems, you may be worried about leaving the chance of attack to be something very small rather than not at all. And you might have said, well, I'd rather have an air gap than live with a firewall that might be only 99.9% effective if that 0.1 means that somebody might do some real damage. And when it comes to operational technology, we go beyond just stealing information. We have the ability, and we've seen attacks from years back, even the Russians attacking the Ukrainian power grid, taking that down, causing real physical harm to those systems. And as we see in more recent attacks like the Colonial Pipeline, there's often confusion about what's connected to what. And if you might have an attack on the IT side of the house, in an abundance of caution, you might be shutting down the pipeline because you don't really know what has gotten over to the OT side. And that can lead to real disruption, and particularly for those at this post here. We all probably went without a full gas tank for quite some time when that occurred. But thankfully, there's a class of technology that can add some certainty about what direction the data is flowing and what is connected to what and in what way. And that's a technology that's been around for a while, but you might not have heard about it, and that's data diodes. Data diodes have been in the intelligence community, pulling data into a SCIF, for example, in a one-way fashion, or protecting and monitoring very high-value assets like a nuclear reactor for a while now. But the technology's come a really long way. These used to be $100,000 purchases and up with really complex installation and tens of thousands of dollars of ongoing licenses. And now you can get the technology for less than a 20th of the cost at times and not have to have those ongoing costs in terms of engineering and licenses. But data diodes as a category do share one thing in common, and that's that they use a physical media to send data in only one direction. So this isn't like software that's detecting what's on the network. It's not like a firewall that uses patches and updates to say, hey, what we know about the enemy is they're able to do this, and it's always a step behind the enemy. It's not using software to define what gets in and out. It uses physics, typically shining light in one form or another in one direction. So it's more of a check valve for data than it is like anything you might have seen on the IT side before. And as a mechanical engineer, of course, I appreciate the ability to use physics in cybersecurity. And so that's what we've done. And my company is one of several providers of data diode technology. They take a little bit different approach than others in that we package all you need into some compact devices, but there's lots of great options out there. Now, when you're shining light in one direction, it does tend to break the internet. And so data diodes, whether it's a single box solution or multiple different servers and proxies, they do resolve the fact that the systems are going to want to talk to something. And there's that one-way transmission in the middle. And they say, well, how can I send data in only one way? If you think about shining a light to somebody on a faraway hill, you're sending that signal, you're broadcasting in one direction. If you don't give them a light, there's no way they can send that data back in. You can think about that happening within a piece of networking hardware. So sending that data in one direction, nothing gets back. And that means that you've got the opportunity to do some really neat things for industrial monitoring and bring equipment into the cloud even that was older than the internet. It's a really exciting way to bring legacy and new equipment online in a safe way. And it can be done really quite affordably now. And because of some of the changes, both to the threat landscape for industrial control systems, as well as changes in the form factor, price point, and usability of the technology category, we've seen more attention to data diodes paid by folks like DHS CISA that in the last year or so started publicly recommending the use of one-way communication diodes to protect the control system boundaries and limit the control and flow of data between systems. Know what direction that data is flowing. You don't necessarily need to live with an air gap. You can get that data from point A to point B where it needs to be. You may have seen diodes in NIST 800-53, more on the IT side in the past, but more recommendations of late on the OT side as well. So once you're able to open up that one-way pipe from some of these legacy systems that really are very unlikely to ever be brought into cybersecurity compliance, let alone actually protect against threat themselves. This could be a programmable logic controller. This could be a network of Modbus devices. Once you can get data out of that system and into the hands of people that need it, you've got an opportunity to improve efficiency and detect, hey, did somebody leave something in manual override? Are we still in 100% outside air because somebody changed it during the early part of the pandemic? Boy, we should be changing that back at the right time here. There's all sorts of alerts and set points and even noise in the data suggesting, hey, humidity is trending in a certain way within a compressor. It might mean something bad's about to happen. Non-obvious things can be divined out of that data using predictive analytics, and you can get that data without injecting a risk of cyber attack when you're using data diodes. It's also quite a bit more granular than you might have with a metering system. You can get some really interesting insights out of high resolution energy meters, but this is actually getting data from that equipment that you might otherwise have to go from substation to substation or building to building to read off on a screen, or otherwise live with less secure ways of getting that data out. Knowing what's about to happen before it happens is a great way to reduce disruption to the mission. You certainly wouldn't want part of the mission that's relying on a data center to have that data center go bad because something's happened with the chiller. So reducing unexpected disruption and increasing the productivity of maintenance teams that might not only be spending a lot of time driving around in the truck checking on equipment, but also when something goes bad, they might not have the right tool with them. And if you can bring them with the right tool at the right time to the right place, you can avoid a second trip. And so many great benefits once you get the data, and you can get it again while blocking attacks that might try to inject ransomware, use the OT system as a backdoor to the IT system, or tamper with or destroy that piece of mechanical equipment, that piece of energy equipment. Certainly things we can avoid and would like to as part of the critical infrastructure protection. Now, as we talk about the ESTCP project that went into an evaluation of these next generation low-cost data diodes, a lot of the use cases are going to focus around remote monitoring. Can I get information from a facility, whether it's on the far side of a military installation or whether it's sensors and other equipment out in the field? Can I get that data back without actually going to get that data manually? That's the main use case we're going to talk about today, but it can also be a use case of pulling data out of the OT side and sending it to the IT side of the house, whether it's for engineering or compliance or reporting reasons. We're working with a water utility in the DC area, for example, that had an air gap between the water treatment plants and the IT side of the house. They now use data diodes, but they were doing a daily DVD burn, which was not only labor intensive and you wind up with a bunch of DVDs on the other side of the room, it's the sort of thing where the data gets stale over the course of a day, and it's greater to have that, greater value to have that in real time. And there's other great use cases like secure copies of information. This is great for intelligence sharing, even for law enforcement with evidence. Great things you can do with data diodes, make sure that nobody can get back to the original copy. But most of the rest of the discussion will be about remote monitoring. And some of those use cases include pulling data out of systems that you'll commonly find across a military installation. We talk about facility-related control systems and some of the different protocols they speak, like BACnet or Lawn Talk. You can pull that, you could be listening in, for example, through a BACnet network, pull that data out through a diode in one-way fashion, and get it off to another side of the network, so you can see how are all my facilities doing. You might have a prioritization or a work ticketing system. Be able to get all that data in one place to really keep a better eye on that infrastructure and deploy your maintenance resources appropriately. And another thing that you can do is you can send files in a one-way fashion, not just a stream of information, but say, I might have log files I need to pull from some network and send it to another. There's some mandates that have come out about reporting activity on federal networks, for example. This is a way to get those log files to a third party without opening the door to attack in that sharing process. You can share information without sharing access. But one of the great use cases on the facility side is for energy savings performance contracts. We're working with an ESCO, for example, that's doing work at a Navy installation where they need to get that measurement and verification data out of the facility and into the hands of the engineering team to make sure that, one, that they're doing the best work that they can, and two, that if there's things they could do to save even more energy and water, that they're able to make those changes. Well, until recently, they've had to go pick up that data via a hard drive in a very manual process, and there was travel involved, and you're talking potentially many thousands of dollars to go get data that is now 6 months old, only to find out, boy, that set point was left there, or we had a belt break, or what any other errors that nobody noticed along the way that were opportunities for savings, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in the end. Get that data not every 6 months, but every day or even every minute using this technology. And what's really exciting about data diodes and their ease of use that has come a long way, the price point, the form factor, is that there's the opportunity to bring legacy equipment into the cloud, into potentially government-approved analytics providers for DoD installations, pulling that data out of everything from legacy industrial control systems on energy assets, on generator sets, to facility-related control systems, as well as in the future, potentially even weapons platforms and other legacy equipment that, again, we want to get a few more good decades out of. And let's make sure that as this equipment gets older and it gets harder and harder to service, let's get that data out and use the power of predictive analytics to spend our investment wisely. So this is a little bit more about data diode technology, really that check valve for data that helps you get the information you need while maintaining the security of an air gap. Let's talk about the ESTCP project that wrapped up last year, evaluating this new class of data diode hardware. The project started back in 2019 and wrapped up in 2022, was centered around looking at answering the question, data diode technology, which has been around for a while, now that it is available in compact form at a low price point, can that be a cost-effective alternative to other methods of getting this data, whether that's running separate fiber in a trench, or whether that's getting that data manually, or optical DVD burns, or industrial firewalls? How does it compare by cost? Does it compare by security? Is this something that might help make it easier to get this data out of these systems, which are often very sensitive and have to go through a lot of approval processes to otherwise bring into an IT network? Now, the project won Project of the Year in 2021, and we're very proud of that. And I've had the pleasure of serving as the principal investigator on that project and worked closely with the folks at the Army Corps of Engineers, Erdic Searle in Champaign, Illinois, with special thanks to Tapan Patel, who we worked with closely, who helped evaluate the technology. And then the end result was very successful. And as of a couple of months ago, the full report is now available for download on the ESTCP website. We'll give you the quick version of it over the next few slides. But for those that aren't familiar with ESTCP, It's the sister program for the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program, or CERTUP. There's ESTCP, the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, is meant to test out new technologies that can help improve the resilience and environmental performance of different technologies across DoD installations. Projects that have gotten a lot of attention of late, for example, in environmental restoration, have to do with mitigating and limiting the effects of the use of PFAS, for example, a chemical of concern. And they have 5 different areas, and the one that we'll talk about most today here is installation energy and water, which is key to being able to serve the mission, making sure that these not only are these installations resilient and able to operate, whether Mother Nature or other threats provide challenges, but also can that equipment be operated as efficiently as possible. And it's a big energy bill. It's almost $4 billion a year just for the facilities across DoD. If we could shave a few percent off of that, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that could go elsewhere to the mission. And there's better things to spend money on than burning it unnecessarily in the form of utilities. So there's an opportunity for both resilience improvements and operational efficiency. And so where does cyber come into this? Well, we talked a little bit about cyber being a key to operational resilience. And you could spend a lot of money with it on a net zero facility, for example. You could do the things you need to do to improve energy efficiency, and perhaps that's the sort of facility that could run for a very long time on renewables, or be able to make good reuse of water in such a way where you can withstand long periods of times with limited resources. But if all of that goes away due to cybersecurity concerns, you just spent a huge amount of money on a kind of useless net zero building. So making sure that we build in cybersecurity as part of that design is key. And that's why cybersecurity for industrial control systems are the sorts of projects that ESTCP has started evaluating in the last few years. Whereas traditionally it was technologies to save energy, improve on-site renewable generation, for example. They've now embraced that cybersecurity is its own class that needs to be evaluated as well. So with this particular project, there were 3 main objectives. One is to show that, yes, data diodes can be an affordable technology, can be cost competitive with firewalls, and have a lower cost of ownership long term, but also be cost effective against other means of data acquisition. First thing you need to do is make sure that nobody can hack through it. And so the test method was penetration testing, and we'll talk about that. The second thing that needed to be verified is, well, if you can't hack through it, can you get the information you need to make engineering decisions? And the second set of the test was compatibility testing with Searle up in Champaign, Illinois. And the third one was long-term performance. Can we leave the device alone? Can it operate out in the field reliably? And there were some long-term field tests as part of the project as well. So the first part of that was penetration testing. Can somebody hack in, or does this optical isolation work, or is there some way around it? And the results showed that, and there's no way an outsider is going to be able to hack through it because there's nothing to hack. It's a physical barrier to cyber attack. Data diodes with their one-way flow using light are designed that way, and this next generation technology was able to withstand those attacks. We had great support from the Threat Systems Management Office at Redstone, as well as the NAVFAC team, the Control System Test Bed out of Port Hueneme. And though they weren't able to hack through it, they did provide really good feedback over the course of the project that made it an even easier product to use. Early in the pandemic, when this project was going, there were times where we were planning on flying out to Searle and helping with some of the testing, and we couldn't go anywhere and nobody would have us. So we had to make some changes to the product to make it really easy to install yourself, to make it such that you don't need somebody highly trained to come out and put it in for you, but that it's easy to use and something you could just mail to somebody. Because we had to do that, it made for a much better product in the end. And on the penetration testing side, performed as expected. The next set of tests was around, well, where can you put these devices and what kind of protocols can they transmit? And lots of different types of protocols, from Modbus to FTP, were tested at different levels. You've probably seen diagrams like this before, down from the sensor level up to basically the building level, if you think about it in terms of a building. And the team at Searle was connecting the hardware to JACEs, to other pieces of equipment, and showed that, yes, you can send the data, whether it's Modbus, BACnet, Longtalk, FTP, and others, reliably in a one-way fashion and connect to a wide variety of pieces of equipment that are out there by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, at different facilities across DoD. And the third part of that was long-term testing, which was to take the hardware out of the lab, put it into operational environments, and continue to pull data off over the course of a period of time. And that test was successful as well. The hardware continued to perform, didn't need additional support from any staff folks. And then when the test was done, the data was accurate. So again, another great result from the test. And overall, the project showed that now that data diode technology has come a long way in terms of usability and cost effectiveness, it can be a great alternative to even pulling data out manually, to firewalls that require patches and updates. It's economically attractive with a quick payback period between months and a few years against other sorts of technology, let alone legacy data diodes, which are far more expensive. But it also can help reduce the risk that somebody would misconfigure. The diode's only going to send data in one direction. You don't need to keep up with the patches and updates. There's not some lag there that might introduce risk. It also opens up some really interesting futures, like the ability to bring data from systems that really shouldn't be talking to each other into one place. It might be the fire protection system. It might be the facility related control systems. It might be badge reader logs. Bringing that data together, you might get some really interesting intelligence about what's happening at your facility, and in such a way where you don't need those systems to either talk with each other or introduce risk from one to another. And again, we talked about the potential benefit more broadly of overall operational efficiency in both terms of energy and water, but also manpower. So tremendous potential benefits when deployed across the DoD portfolio. So it's a little bit about the results of the ESTCP project. Wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about some additional resources for those that might be looking for other technologies that have been through ESTCP. And there's a couple dozen or so cybersecurity technologies among hundreds of other projects across the ESTCP. These are just a few that were focused on facility-related control system cybersecurity. They go back to about 2014, and they're continuing to do projects today. So if you want to read more about these, you can go to certupestcp.org. You can interact with the principal investigator. You can also get in touch with the ESTCP program staff. There's a great set of technologies, and depending on what your needs are, there's probably something that's right for you. And a little bit more about ESTCP. If you're watching this live, this is a great time to get involved with ESTCP. Not only can you deploy technologies that have already been tested across different installations, but in the next 5 weeks or so, there's a 5-page pre-proposal due. If you wanted to test out a new technology at a DoD installation, the ESTCP has funding available for those evaluations. There's more information on that at certupestcp.org. But these are great opportunities not only to try out new technologies that might have a big impact across the portfolio, but also to integrate already proven technologies into new ways. There's a topic just for integrating those previously tested technologies into energy savings performance contracts, for example, in a variety of different formats. So take a look at that. They're due in a few weeks there. And then if you are on the DoD side, if you have an installation willing to host a technology, whether you know that technology today or you just want to make your installation available to test out whether it's renewable energy, cybersecurity, energy efficiency, they'd love to hear from you over at the ESTCP office. They'll do matchmaking for you. They have a set of great events, including an annual symposium at the end of each year. They had theirs last year in Arlington, Virginia, as well as a regular webinar series. So as we wrap up here with the presentation content, hopefully you learned a bit more about some of the options you have today. There's certainly lots of great technologies available and techniques to help you reduce the risk of cyber attack. And data diodes, hopefully now, is within your tool belt and something that you can call on when you need to know what's happening in a network, when you need to monitor that equipment, but you can't afford to let somebody hack back in. And just a couple of final technical takeaways. What is a data diode? It's something that makes data go in only one direction, and that's the key differentiator versus the other sorts of technologies. And once you can do that, you get the intelligence you need and the security you deserve by physically blocking those cyber attacks. So with that, I wanted to thank you and open it up to questions.
Well, Colin, that was great. Thank you very much. And with everyone on here, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat, and then we can add them in and have Colin answer them over time. But I have a couple of teaser questions to kick it off right now while we get the questions coming from everybody in attendance today. So the first one is, with someone putting in a data diode, would they want to put in one at every air handler and chiller, or just at a building or installation level? Like, what would you recommend?
So data diodes have the key benefit of blocking signals from one network to another. It's a physically enforced one-way connection. That also means it doesn't differentiate between good traffic and bad. So you have to put these in the right place. It's a great question. Now you may, so you wouldn't necessarily want to put one in the middle of your building automation system, because it will block controls. But so many of our buildings are designed to operate in an islanded mode. I mean, that's how all buildings performed before we were starting to bring them online. So the appropriate place to pull this data out would likely be at the building level. So you might have this at one central location, pulling it out via log files or a stream of information. That way each of your buildings can operate independently, but you know what's happening. So it does depend where you draw that boundary, and that's the boundary across which nothing's going to get back in.
Okay. All right. No, that's great. And are there some applications that are just not a good fit at all for data diodes?
Well, sort of in the mentioning previously, if you need to get a signal from here to there, data diodes, you can use two, one in one direction, one in another. That's a really complex architecture that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for facility-related control systems. You know, it's a matter of, let's say you're trying to get demand signals for a solar plant, for example. So you need to get that market pricing and commands back in. May not be the best fit for a traditional data diode. But in terms of industrial monitoring, just if you need to know what's happening, and there's tens of millions of commercial buildings, that really those teams just need to know, do I need to send somebody out there? That use case, it's really well suited.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely appreciate, March 9 and March 9th is coming in hot for those pre-proposals to get back to ESTCP. What would really make for a good ESTCP project?
So the program it sees a lot of applications each year, and what they're looking for is, what are those technologies that might move the needle in terms of resilience or water? Of course, water stress has been an issue for a long time. It seems to be getting worse. What could this technology make a big impact, either a huge impact on a smaller set of installations, or could be something that would be helpful all around DoD installations around the world. The other things that once you've got that impact quantified, and it can be estimates, but just knowing what is the order of magnitude this could do, having a solid team together. And if you have a test site already, let's say you've got an Army installation willing to host your specific technology, putting that together in that application is going to make it that much easier to approve that kind of project, rather than the ESTCP program office having to do the matchmaking. And at the same time, they're happy to do the matchmaking, and the more of the installations that want to be a part of it, they're happy to make that match. But if you bring those things together and you show that it's a really impactful technology, those makes for elements of a good proposal.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So where else can I get training and information regarding cybersecurity for control systems?
So there's some great conferences coming up, including RSA, S4 is in a couple of weeks. There's also AFCEA, and I know that lots of folks from the Navy attend that. And then, of course, the SAMI JETSI coming up here in just a couple of months. So look for cybersecurity content there. One of the places I really like to turn is the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International. They have a lot of great free content out there. They also have membership levels, and you can get it's like just like a couple of bucks a month when it comes down to it. But they do make that available for students. They make it available for folks, and a lot of it is free. But it's a great place where I think some 20,000 members contribute to that control system cybersecurity knowledge. So they're at cs2ai.org, or Control System Cybersecurity Association International.
Great. No, that's great. I have one more question, then we'll get to everybody else in there. So, did you get any lessons learned out of winning project of the year, and for really submitting, for those interested in submitting on an ESTCP project?
So, I'd like to think that we got project of the year because we were like the most impactful technology ever, and we can have a great impact on cybersecurity across OT. But I think some of the things that made that left a good impression with the team is that we stuck to the schedule and we stuck to the budget. We continued to work hard and have deliverables, even though it was the worst of the pandemic. We really had to pivot on what we were doing. But in terms of our ability as a company to bring this technology to the DoD community, we didn't want to add years worth of delay. We said we're just going to plow through and get creative and figure out how we can do these tests. And we're really focused not on this becoming shelfware technology that could work really well but isn't deployed. It was all about making sure it got into the hands of people that could actually use it. So if you have a technology and you have a vision of what it looks like in the future when people are actually buying it, and even a vision for how are they going to buy it? Are we going to sell through system integrators? Are we going to be on the GSA schedule? Or are people going to buy it with a credit card? Understanding and having the commercialization and tech transfer kind of from the very beginning of your project, that helped motivate us to go fast and deliver on time. So I'd recommend that as you're building a proposal, if you're submitting a paper in a few weeks, have an aggressive schedule, but have it also be realistic and say, what if we do have another global pandemic or a supply chain shortage, or build some things in, not necessarily more time, but other paths to success. I think if there's resilience in your work plan, you're going to be successful.
No, that's great advice. So we have a couple of questions in here. I'm going to go to the first one from Tom. I think Sabota. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Tom asks, are the data diode devices part of the HVAC control systems, or is it another subcontractor responsibility?
Yeah, the data diodes they're interesting in that they have traditionally been more on the IT equipment side. But you're probably not going to find data diodes in the master spec format today, though. If you need that, I think my team's been working on something like that. So it can depend on, because it's sort of new to the OT world. It's not necessarily been sort of permanently assigned to the controls technicians. So where it fits, I'd say is still up in the air. But I'm sure the folks working on the UFC, United Facility Criteria, and other guidance documents would love your input.
Okay, and then he asked a follow-up question: would these be specified in Division 26, and have the guide specs been updated to include this option? Yeah,
I think again, I think that's probably where they want to go, but I don't think you'll find them there today. But that's great feedback. I'd love to, if you have a follow-up question, I'd love to for you to reach out, Tom.
Great. Brad Wheaton asks, would the Department of State qualify as a hosting agency?
Very likely. There has been lots of cross-agency collaboration with the ESTCP. They typically have on their technical committee, they'll have representatives from Department of Energy as well as GSA and the Public Building Service. So both, not only do they want collaboration across the agencies to make sure they're not, not testing technology out multiple times. Like if this is something that's really relevant to energy, they don't want to test it out again at state. They want to make good use of taxpayer dollars. So there's that collaboration. But also, the sorts of technologies you might find in the overseas building office, the consulates and embassies, so many of those controllers are going to be the same sorts of Honeywell and Johnson controllers, Johnson Controls stuff that you'll find all across DoD. So I think that they'd be very welcome to collaboration. Again, I'm only speaking as a principal investigator who's been through the process and not representing the government, but I'm confident they'd love to hear from you.
Oh, absolutely. We have one from Brandon Grimes. If one places a diode at the building level, how would engineers be able to make set point changes to control systems as part of their regular duties?
So that is a sort of a business decision of how you go about making those changes. So there's a lot of systems where the building controls engineer is going to be making those changes manually anyways. We work with a Fortune 100 manufacturer that has a lot of facilities where they always have the person, whether they're right there or nearby, they have a person making those changes because they're very worried about cyber attack. But they also want their teams all around the world to know what's happening and to pick up the phone and say, hey, can you get out there, or put that data into a predictive analytics platform. So for them, it's full visibility, but they still want a person involved in making that change. There's the opportunity to expand your boundary if you have several buildings on one network and you might want to share that network. Let's say it might be multiple military installations within a department, sharing back to a central location. You could be doing those commands within that boundary, but as soon as you put the diode, there is where you have that breakpoint. So it's a matter of, do you want to know what's happening at the building level and have someone do there, or are you going to expand it to more of the installation level? But yeah, it would cut it off from there. It just depends on how your folks are. It will help them to know what place they need to be and help save time, but it would cut off the ability to do that remotely. We have talked to some folks in commercial real estate that didn't really realize the implications of the fact that their maintenance team could make changes on their smartphone while on vacation, or their kids could pick up their smartphone. But like they could do it basically from anywhere. And like, well, if our people can do it, it probably means that some other people can do it too. So that whether it was a malicious intent or an accident or a disgruntled employee, they were like, wait a minute, maybe we should take back a little bit of that control.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question. Any last questions for Colin? Just hold out. No. Okay. Well, Colin, thank you for your time. Thank you, Fend Incorporated, for everything. We really appreciate everyone participating in today's session. We hope that you took your time out of your day to be with us today. Very informative presentation, and hopefully there's some great takeaways for everyone. I definitely enjoyed really seeing how you can take legacy systems to be able to incorporate it into today. So I really appreciated that. Definitely had a lot of interest from our participants today. So thank you, Colin, for everything today. Before we wrap up our program here today, I'd like to take some time, just a couple of local post events that we have, as well as our upcoming national events. We're always committed to bringing more content and fun events throughout the year. The national website, SAME national website, is being refreshed, so look for our events on the post page. You have to add a classic to our page to get the full calendar of events. So, but the first event we have, the DC Post is hosting a Young Professionals Headshots and Happy Hours at our favorite DC speakeasy, Capo DC. So join us for fun networking, drinks, food, and prizes. If you're looking for a new headshot, we will have 10-minute photography sessions throughout the event, and you'll be able to get a fresh, lightly touched digital photo you can use for your LinkedIn profile or resume, We do have a limited number of headshot spaces available, so sign up for this event on Tuesday, February 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. And then our next First Friday session is March 3rd, which is low carbon materials, achieving optimization during design and construction, presented by Kirk Kessner from Walter P. Moore. Registration is open right now, and as always, members attend for free, and all registered participants do earn 1 PDH. And then, are you interested in sharing your knowledge in educational topics? For our First Friday series, we are now accepting presentation applications starting in July this year, and feel free to visit our website to learn more and how you can submit your topic today. And then SAME National is hosting the members only CAP Week in Bethesda, March 27 through 29. There are special networking events and a fellows luncheon, as well as brief from the DoD and civilian agencies, setting up their upcoming initiatives and planning for the year. So it should be a great event, always highly anticipated, and it is their first national conference of the year. And then as part of our society's goals to enrich the STEM pipeline, we do have 2 upcoming deadlines. We have opened up our annual national scholarship applications for currently enrolled college students in the architecture, engineering, and environmental studies. Last year, we awarded $40,000 to 10 students. So please be sure to share this opportunity with college students. The application deadline is March 1st. And then the next opportunity is for the 2023 STEM Engineering and Construction Camps program. And these camps are held at different locations across the U.S. and are open to high school students who are interested in learning more about the AEC industry. DC Post provides scholarships for the local camp and helps up to 6 students to attend each year. And that application is due on March 15th. And then I'm also excited to share with you our upcoming 15th Annual Small Business Conference held at the Capitol Turnaround in DC Navy Yard. So you won't want to miss this event where we share federal, state, and local business opportunities for 2023 so you can build a strong network that's focused around small business. Look for details next week on both the DC and Northern Virginia Post websites and email announcements for registration to reserve your exhibit booth, as well as sponsorship opportunities as well. So this should be a great event. And finally, we are going to be starting our planning for programming into the spring. Be sure to visit our website at classic.sme.org DC Post to mark a calendar for upcoming events. So again, thank you all for attending our First Friday series. And Colin, thank you, and Fen for providing excellent content today. Look for document delivery of the slides, a PDH certificate, and a recording on the DC Post website later this month. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our next program soon. So thank you all again. Appreciate everything.